So we have a site and a mobile app called Open Forum, and Open Forum is really about giving small businesses access to information that they might not necessarily get access to, and of course we curate it among 200 experts to put the right information in front of them. So to go back to your first question, what did we learn? What we learned is fast is not fast enough. So, and you, of course, understand that. As a big brand, there's a lot of processes associated with putting information out there, and we like to make sure it's exactly perfect. As we said, we're trained to be controlling. However, in a situation where you're trying to create the community and have the community create the content, obviously you don't have any opportunity for that, and you have to be really quick. What we learned is the way to listen is actually to allow the community to become an even bigger part of the content creation. So we had 200 experts of content that we're putting out there, but now we have 15% of our content in just like a month or so is being created actually by our card members who are themselves experts. And that allows us to give them an opportunity to create their own fame. We're taking a relatively unknown small business owner and putting him or her up there as an expert for 1 million people a month to see and listen to and hear about.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the thing that's really interesting that you're hearing in all three of these examples is this is really a cultural change, right? This isn't a technology question, and it isn't even a business question. It's, how do we internally start to listen because we believe our customers actually have something to teach us? And that, I think, is very different than it was even 5 years ago, because it's not because people are being forced to, it's because, wow, there's really good value here.
And Steve, I think the other thing we're seeing is obviously great innovation comes out of this. One of the sort of following on what Susan was talking about at SAP, I mean, we're doing a lot to convene communities of experts internally and externally. And imagine you take airline service engineers or hospital administrators, and yeah, they can listen to us, but we really want them to share with each other. And out of that, it's amazing the new product innovation that comes out of that. So when you listen, you get a lot more than customer feedback. You actually get new products.
Now, there's a suite of new ad products that are on the market. They've been on the market for a few years, but Facebook made a big splash with it earlier in the year when they came out with something called Sponsored Stories. And the idea there was whatever your customers are saying, with some moderation and filters for, work safe and cuss words and so on, can become part of the ad unit. So I'm curious, as you curate, convene, and create or co-create with your customers' content, has it changed how you do what you call traditional media buying? And do you take that content and turn your media buy literally into a media distribution strategy?
John, I would say most of our media discussion, our buying discussions are first all about mix. So traditional media still works. It's what's the goal and how do you mix all the other avenues. But 9 times out of 10 now, our discussion is really about distribution. And it's distributing content, whether it's the publisher who we're buying media from, or we're co-contributing content. And the publishers that get more of our money are the ones that have better distribution strategies than just what they provide on their platform. And that's the big change, I think. It really is, you need distribution experts as much as you do, kind of frequency and reach experts.
And I would just add, it's really the consumer who votes, not the marketers, not the advertisers, right? If the consumer is responding to the medium, then we're going to be drawn to that medium. And that's where we're going to put our dollars. And the beautiful thing about, of course, all of the digital mediums is you get immediate feedback.
Right.
We have an example recently of that kind of immediate feedback where we worked with Forbes on their Ad Voice program, which is a chance for marketeers to contribute content on their platform.
Right.
And so we've been blogging there, and last week's post got 14,000 views like that, and we ended up coming on the homepage as one of the most viewed posts on Forbes.com. So it was an interesting kind of crossover there for us. And
so let me ask the question that probably many are wondering, which is, if marketers are actually creating content, and or buying their way onto the page that has traditionally been, the other side of the Chinese wall, so to speak, in a traditional publishing environment. Number one, how do you do that with authenticity? And do marketers have the skills, and have you built those skills up? Or number two, is there anything that feels icky about that?
It's interesting because it's been controversial, and there's certainly been comments in the press about that. And I think there's two things I'd say. One is that it's clearly marked what it is, and that this
Right.
comes from us. And I think it's just another forum to have a conversation. And I think we work very hard with the people who do the posts to talk about things that are engaging and interesting, and to do that in a way that is authentic to us. So I think because it's open and we're
Right.
not hiding that, it's another channel.
And so then you get the feedback. If people consume it, like it, share it, then you know you've done it right.
But I think you also really need to have a certain level of sophistication and ability before you go there, or else you are making yourself pretty vulnerable. I think you have to make sure that the content is going to be relevant and right for the medium.
And I think not all content needs to be sponsored content. I think one of the things we aspire to, it's a range of content invention, if you will, but one category is it's so good that the media partner doesn't want to buy it. I mean, they don't want to pay you for it.
Right.
They want you to pay them for it.
Right.
Now, that's not a very good business model for a publisher, so they're not going to do that a lot. And then there's a co-creation model where together
Right.
you create something that's distributed far and wide, and then there is the sponsored content. So I think all these models are kind of competing. And part of our challenge is to say, can this content be so good that this media company actually wants the content without our buy?
Right.
I would just add, we think about this question a lot, the issue of the editorial objectivity of the content that we're putting together, and the authenticity of the mission, which in our case is really to provide value and advocacy for small business owners. And what we have learned is that while there's certainly opportunity to have the brand be more present and to actually put offers, if you will, in front of the people who are using the content, we have chosen not to do that. And the reason we've chosen not to do that is because we believe that the asset is based on its authenticity. And in fact, the asset ends up paying for itself in other ways. So, for example, our asset is delivering $75 to $100 million in what would be paid media dollars through what we're doing basically through earned media. And that ratio is a pretty good return on investment. So while there's certainly an opportunity to integrate, there's also an opportunity to win over your customers just by giving them something as opposed to offering them something, to quote, to draw from Demi Moore this morning as we had another breakfast on a similar topic.
Right. Steve.
I would add there's a role that's emerging out there with the title content strategist, and you're hearing more and more brands talking about employing, either hiring or putting on staff, a content strategist, which I think is really interesting because for the first time people are actually having a strategy around content. There's a danger here, though, that I would just wave my hand in the air a little bit about, which is, brands and agencies, there's always been a certain amount of jealousy between brands and agencies and publishers about, hey, why don't we just do some of that ourselves? We'll take some of our media spend money and we'll be creative and we'll make stuff. And if you run those numbers all the way out to their inevitable conclusion, content's still really expensive. And so, the idea that really, if publishing was such a great business, before you guys would jump into it, publishers would be telling you, John, right? Publishing's a tough business, and that was...
It is a tough business.
Right? So
Those are all publishers laughing.
But
or
that's
the
if
people
you're
that
in the
I've met
business
with
of-
who are marketers.
Yeah.
But that's if you're in the business of publishing.
yes.
If you're in another business and you use publishing as a marketing tool, that's a different ballgame.
Right.
And good content doesn't mean you have a distribution strategy or a platform to be seen. And I think that's still something that brands are always going to struggle with. And we can't expect everyone's coming to us. Those days are over. We've got to go to where people are. So there's also that piece of it. As good as your content is, if no one finds it, it doesn't really matter.
I wanted to ask you about distribution strategies. Once you have content, you don't just have, the professionally and semi-professionally produced content of Open Forum or Eco Imagination, very professionally 3 days that you created at Sapphire and then that you distribute 365, as you put it. You have millions of customers making content about your brands every day. You have selected in your advertisements at American Express some of those tweets around your social currency campaign. So I'm watching television yesterday and I see tweets flying around this beautiful 30-second spot. That's content in a way. How do you view distribution of this content, whether it's your own or consumer created? Are you thinking, because publishers obsess about distribution. That is like, I wake up in the middle of the night going, do I have enough distribution, right? Are you obsessing about distribution, or is this changing how you direct your agencies to think about distribution?
We're obsessing about distribution, equally investing in good content, and there's a whole, lot of experimentation there, and the best produced stuff isn't necessarily the best content, and I think that's a whole other discussion. But distribution, we're just hungry for it. And I think a smart media partner that comes in, or a smart agency that comes in, and it's not just what's the idea, but how are we going to get it out there, they're equally important these days. And media partners and agencies that don't understand that probably aren't going to get as much business from us.